The small town of Ravenwood had its fair share of ghost stories, but none as infamous as the legend of Ghostface Hollow. It was said that deep in the woods, hidden from prying eyes, there stood an old, crumbling mansion, a place where unspeakable horrors had taken place. The mansion, once the grand estate of the wealthy Blackwood family, had been abandoned for nearly a century, ever since the night of the massacre. Growing up, the kids in town used to dare each other to venture into the woods and find the mansion. Most would get too scared and turn back before even catching a glimpse of it, but those who made it claimed to have seen strange things, shadows that moved on their own, whispers in the trees, and a figure with a ghostly white face watching them from the windows. The legend of Ghostface Hollow wasn't just a tale of a haunted house. It was a story of murder, revenge, and a spirit that refused to rest. I had heard the stories growing up, just like everyone else in Ravenwood. My friends and I would joke about going to Ghostface Hollow on Halloween, but we never actually did it. We were all too scared to tempt fate. But as I got older, the fear faded, replaced by a sense of curiosity. I wanted to know the truth behind the legend. Was it just a story, or was there something more to it? That curiosity turned into an obsession. I started researching the history of the Blackwood family and the mansion. What I found only deepened the mystery. The Blackwoods had been one of the most prominent families in the region, known for their wealth and influence. But behind the facade of respectability, there were rumors of dark practices, occult rituals, strange disappearances, and a string of tragic deaths that plagued the family for generations. The most notorious event in the Blackwood history was the massacre that took place on the night of October 31, 1923. According to the town records, every member of the family was found brutally murdered inside the mansion. The details were gruesome, bodies slashed and mutilated beyond recognition. The killer was never found, and the case remained unsolved. The legend of Ghostface Hollow began shortly after. People claimed that the ghost of the killer still haunted the mansion, wearing a mask to hide the disfigured face beneath. They said the ghost was seeking revenge, waiting for anyone foolish enough to enter the mansion so it could add another soul to its collection. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than what the official records said. I decided to find out for myself. I gathered a group of friends who were just as curious as I was, and we made a pact to spend the night in Ghostface Hollow. It was a cold, moonless night when we set out for the mansion. The woods were eerily silent, the trees casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. We followed an old dirt path that wound through the forest, barely visible in the darkness. The further we went, the more uneasy I felt, as if the air itself was thick with anticipation. After what felt like hours, we finally reached the clearing where the mansion stood. The sight of it took my breath away. The house was massive, with tall, spindly towers reaching up into the night sky. The windows were dark and empty, like the hollow eyes of a skull. Vines and weeds had overrun the exterior, but the structure itself remained intact, as if it had been preserved by some unnatural force. We approached the front door, our footsteps echoing in the stillness. I reached out and pushed the door open. It creaked on its hinges, revealing a dark, musty interior. The air inside was cold and damp, the smell of decay thick in my nostrils. We stepped inside, our flashlights casting long beams of light across the dusty floor. The interior was just as grand as I had imagined, ornate woodwork, chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and a grand staircase that led to the upper floors. But everything was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, as if time had stood still since the night of the massacre. We split up to explore the house, each of us taking a different part of the mansion. I headed for the basement, drawn by an inexplicable urge. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended into the darkness. The air grew colder with each step, the silence oppressive. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a large, open room. It was filled with old furniture, crates, and what looked like the remnants of an old wine cellar. But what caught my attention was a door at the far end of the room, slightly ajar. I walked towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I pushed the door open, I felt a sudden chill, like a breath of cold air. Inside, I found a small, windowless room. It was empty, except for a large mirror that hung on the wall. The mirror was old, the glass warped and foggy with age. As I stared into it, I felt a strange sensation, as if something was watching me from the other side. My reflection seemed to waver and distort, and for a moment, I thought I saw another figure standing behind me. I looked around, but the room was empty. I turned back to the mirror, but my reflection was gone. In its place was the face of a man, his features twisted in a mask of rage and pain. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale and stretched tight over his skull. But what struck me most was the mask he wore, a white, ghostly face with dark, empty eyes. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The figure in the mirror moved closer, his face filling the glass. I could hear him breathing, his breath ragged and wet. And then he spoke. "Leave this place," he whispered, his voice cold and hollow. "Leave, or join me inside these walls." I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. I could hear the others calling out to me, their voices distant and muffled. I burst through the door and back into the basement, my mind reeling. I found my friends in the main hall, their faces pale and drawn. They had seen something too, something that had shaken them to the core. We didn't speak, didn't share what we had witnessed. We just knew that we had to leave, to get out of that house before it was too late. We made our way to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. The air around us grew colder, the shadows deepening. And then we heard it, a low, guttural laugh that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I turned to look at my friends, but they were gone. The mansion had swallowed them up, just like the legend said it would. I was alone, trapped in the dark with the ghost of Ghostface Hollow. The laugh grew louder, filling my ears, my mind. I could feel him getting closer, the air thick with his presence. I ran blindly through the halls, the rooms twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. Every door I opened led to another hallway, another dead end. The house was a maze, a prison, and I was the prey. Finally, I found myself back in the small room with the mirror. The door slammed shut behind me, sealing me in. I turned to face the mirror, but the glass was empty, no reflection, no ghostly figure. Just the cold, dark glass. But I could feel him there, just beyond the surface, waiting. I could hear his breath, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. And then, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The hand tightened, pulling me closer to the mirror. I could see my reflection now, twisted and distorted, merging with the ghostly face that had haunted the house for nearly a century. "Join me," the voice whispered, so close I could feel the cold breath on my neck. "Become one with the darkness, with the fear." I felt myself slipping, the cold seeping into my bones, my mind unraveling. The world around me faded, the darkness closing in. And then, I was inside the mirror, looking out at the empty room. I was trapped, just like the others, just like the Blackwoods. A part of the legend, a ghost in the walls of Ghostface Hollow. And there I remain, waiting for the next curious soul to venture into the woods, to find the mansion, and to join me in the darkness.